Antarctica, the icy frontier at the bottom of the world, is a land cloaked in mystery and intrigue. With its endless frozen landscapes and harsh climate, it continues to surprise us with what's uncovered during exploration or what remains from past expeditions. With that in mind, here are the 20 strangest things found beyond the ice wall in Antarctica. Number 20. Ancient continents. I'm going to start off with a pretty weird one here, but I promise it'll make sense in time. One thing that you're going to find all throughout this video is that a lot of people have had to literally dive deep into Antarctica to uncover some of its secrets. Sometimes they do that in a physical way, whether it be by digging or even drilling out ice cores, but another method comes from above via satellite. Satellites have long looked at Antarctica from the atmosphere and used a variety of technology to scan and see what may be underneath the ice and snow. One particularly eye-opening discovery came from a probe that actually went down in 2018, but once its data was recovered and then examined, that's when they found that there were ancient continents known as cratons that were buried under Antarctica's surface. Cratons are actually between the Earth's mantle and crust, and so they can have quite the impact on the ice sheet that Antarctica has become over time. Should global warming continue, and let's be honest with ourselves, it's not slowing down anytime soon. This is important because these ancient continents had to get there somehow, and they obviously did not dig or tunnel their way down below the snow and ice. But instead, they were placed there by some kind of event, possibly one of the ones that had helped to shape the Earth from one giant supercontinent to the multiple continents that we have now. And when you think about it, it also explains some of the non-snow and ice stuff that's been found there over the years. There are some more classic terrains in the continent that you may not know about via these cratons that may have actually helped them form. All of this goes to show exactly what you need to explore a place like Antarctica from each and every angle. If we never looked at it from the perspective of a satellite, we may have missed out on things and could have forever missed a piece of ancient puzzle coming into focus. Hopefully, this already proves to you that there is far more to Antarctica than it just being a frozen wasteland. Most people don't see it like that, and by the end of the video, you likely won't either. Number 19. Plesiosaur. Given how some people look at Australia, you might think that it would be unlikely to find something like a fossil in its ranks, except that that's not true at all. In fact, all manner of fossils have been found both in Antarctica and the islands that surround it. The oldest fossil of the lot was the Plesiosaur, which was a creature that was around 200 million years ago during the Triassic Age of history. That alone paints Antarctica as a place that was full of life in its waters and indicates that things weren't quite as frigid as they are now. The Plesiosaur is one of the most iconic sea creatures to have ever swam in the prehistoric oceans. It actually was not a dinosaur, but it is said to have lived alongside them, gliding through the deep like a primeval submarine. It featured a long neck, a sleek body, paddle-like limbs, and a face that could look friendly or terrifying depending on what angle that you caught it from. The neck alone could actually make up half the creature's total length, which would sometimes be over 20 feet. They were, however, a carnivorous marine reptile, feeding mostly on fish, squid-like creatures, and smaller marine reptiles. Some species even had needle-like teeth that would be perfect for catching small prey, while others were apex predators that took down bigger game. In 2011, a fossil of a pregnant plesiosaur was found and showed a large, fully formed baby inside of the mother, so they were actually sea moms that gave live birth and did not lay eggs. The first ever recognized plesiosaur fossil was actually described in the early 19th century by legendary fossil hunter Mary Anning, who discovered the fossil in Lyme Regis, England. Number 18. The Pyramids of Antarctica. Alright, well, the next one is what you might call a classic story of Antarctica, and not exactly in a way that makes people smile. I talked before about satellites being used to help see Antarctica in a new light and how that can bring new insight into what's really there. The flip side of that is when things like Google Earth began to get popular, people looked all over the place and saw things that they recognized from an aerial viewpoint and began to wonder if there may be an ancient civilization that had once been on the continent before it froze over. One of the biggest pieces of evidence of this are the newest images of so-called pyramids in Antarctica's snowy tundra. One of them was found in Antarctica's Ellsworth mountain range, and when you look at the picture, you can see why a lot of people may have thought that it was actually a pyramid. It has four-faced sides, and it comes to a point. That's how we define a pyramid in most other parts of the world, especially Egypt. Of course, now, naturally, that led people online, and armchair conspiracy theorists, especially from less credible sites, said that aliens or lost civilizations had made the pyramids and then took off. Except that when you talk to professors who have actually studied stuff like this in the past for real, you see that the answer is actually a bit more mundane and practical. The image? Well, it's just a mountain. In fact, there are mountains in Antarctica, and I told you that this pyramid was above a mountain range, and it was one of those peaks that emerged out of the ice and snow. They're technically known as pyramidal peaked mountains, and while they are rare in the world, they do exist. What throws people off are the four flat faces, and even the professors will admit that most mountains only have one or two of them, but this one had four. That makes a unique entity, but it doesn't make it man-made or alien-made. Sorry about that. Number 17. the mega penguin colony. We all know that penguins are part of Antarctica. It's arguably the most famous part of the entire continent, especially after they did March of the Penguins. I mean, Morgan Freeman doing the narration? Come on. However, what I'm talking about now is something altogether more shocking, that being the fact that in 2018 scientists didn't only find a new penguin colony, which would have been cool in its own right, but they actually found a mega colony. How big is a mega colony? Well, it makes up about 1.5 million penguins. That's not a random guess either. They would use drone footage to count the pairs that were in the colony, and there were said to be over 750,000 pairs. Naturally, there are many people who want to make this a wildlife reserve, and this is a place that the penguins can be safe from both humanity and climate change. Number 16. The hole. Here's yet another example of something being viewed from above and people freaking out about it because they don't know exactly what it is that they're looking at. It's fair to say that Antarctica has a pretty steady terrain when you go from one place to another. There are not certain dips in the earth that you may see in other continents due to a variety of natural conditions. And yet, in the frozen ice and snow, there are certain holes that occasionally pop up, and they can be rather large in scope. They're known as polynyas, and while they are rare, they're also a natural part of the continent and the surrounding frozen area. But what exactly are they? Well, the irony here is that it's quite simple. They're just unfrozen areas of water. Some of them happen in massive ice sheets due to the wind and other factors, but some are found in sheets of ice out on the open water, and those are far more curious, as scientists don't exactly know how they formed. Either way, they have happened many times over the years, and so you don't have to freak out about Antarctica falling apart just yet. It may happen eventually if global warming continues, but not right now. Now it's time for today's topic. When pilot Gabriel Knox took off from Punta Arenas, Chile, for a routine ice reconnaissance mission with his co-pilot on August 1, 2025, he never imagined what his drone-mounted camera would capture. While flying near the Queen Maud land sector of Antarctica, Knox deviated slightly from his route after spotting unusual terrain formations on his thermal map just south of the 82nd parallel. As they approached the ice wall, an area normally shrouded in whiteout conditions, weather suddenly cleared. What appeared beyond the towering 200-foot ice ridge stunned the entire crew. Sprawling endlessly was a vibrant green valley dotted with winding rivers, lush vegetation, and what looked like ancient ruins. The region appeared untouched, unaffected by the continent's sub-zero conditions. Knox immediately began filming, sending real-time footage back to the observation base. What baffled scientists most wasn't just the landscape, but its temperature. Thermal readings showed localized zones as warm as 18 degrees Celsius 64 degrees Fahrenheit. No existing satellite had ever recorded anything like it, likely due to interference from high atmospheric anomalies in the region. The footage has since been classified by multiple agencies, but for a few hours, it remained online, enough for millions to witness what might be the first undeniable proof that something lies beyond Antarctica's ice wall. Number 15. Lake Vastto. When you hear there's a lake in Antarctica, you might pause for a bit before admitting, yeah, that makes sense with all the snow and ice. You likely think that it's frozen, which also makes sense. However, Lake Vastto is far more than a basic thing. For example, this lake is not one that's actually on the surface like pretty much every lake that you know about. Instead, it is known as a subglacial lake, which means that it's below the frozen ice sheet that is the surface. And just how far down do you have to go to reach it? Well, only 4 kilometers. That should tell you everything you need to know about how thick the surface is. And while this kind of thing had been theorized for decades, it would not actually be discovered until 1993. And ever since then, a lot of people have tried to see what else is inside of it, specifically all the types of life that likely reside in the waters. Every piece of life could easily change how we perceive the continent, and that's important for scientific research in the end. Number 14. Reptile Egg. Now we're going to have a look at the egg of a giant ancient creature that used to live in Antarctica. Finding a fossilized egg is something special no matter who you are and where you found it, but when this one was discovered, it took about 10 years to figure out where it had actually come from. It turns out that it was indeed a reptile egg that likely was laid about 68 million years ago. Just as important, it wasn't a land reptile but a sea one. It helps to paint a much different picture of what life may have been like in Antarctica once upon a time. Number 13. Antarctic Rainforest. Now, there's 2 words that you likely never expected to hear, but it's true. There was a rainforest found in the snow of Antarctica. The question is, how was it possible? The answer is actually twofold. First, it's in what was found. Roots, spores, and pollen were all found trapped in the frozen continent, and the only way that they could have gotten there was if a forest had grown there once upon a time. There is another element to this, and that would be time itself. This forest wasn't a recent thing or even something that took place in the most recent age, but instead, the estimates would point to a time about 90 million years ago when the climate on Antarctica was much, much different. So different, in fact, that it was completely warmer and able to house a lush and green environment. Some felt that it wouldn't have been too much different to what New Zealand or even Wales has right now. It really makes you wonder about everything that lived in Antarctica during the time, and as you've already seen, ancient creatures did exist in the place and left fossils and eggs behind. So there are likely many more to be found should we go looking in the right places. Number 12. Ice fish colony. I talked about life in Antarctica's waters before, but this next one stands out because of the sheer number of fish that happen to be in one specific space. It's said that there is one such breeding ground that exists in the cold waters that is so numerous in fish that apparently 60 million of them will come together when the time comes to breed. In fact, that number makes it the largest animal colony in the entire world. The ice fish itself is also a unique fish, not the least of which is because of its transparent body, but also because the ice fish is the only vertebrate to have absolutely no red blood cells. So once again, life does find a way to survive in a place like Antarctica and its freezing, chilly waters. Number 11. Meteorites. Now we'll go from the cold continent to the frozen depths of space. Meteorites are the remains of any meteor that tries to enter the atmosphere only to be burned up and dispersed a good bit before hitting the ground. Where it hits is vital to both finding the meteorite and trying to get to it before the environment takes over. In the case of Antarctica, it's actually one of the most perfect places to find such a space rock because the cold conditions ensure that it doesn't easily erode. The snow will soften the impact, and it doesn't shatter into a million pieces. That's why when you hear about meteorite findings, you will often hear that they came from Antarctica. For proof of this, in 2023, a team went down there and found 5 different meteorites. One of them was actually 7.6 kilograms, which is the heaviest that was ever found on the continent. If you want even more context of how many space rocks have been discovered there, it's actually over 45,000. Granted, many of them are quite small, but they do vary in shape and size due to the nature of them crashing into the Earth in the first place. Number 10. Mount Arabus. Given how cold Antarctica is, and make no mistake about it, it is cold. However cold you are right now while you're watching the video, or even the coldest you've likely ever felt, is nothing compared to what it's like there. You may actually be surprised to learn that Antarctica does have a volcano known as Mount Arabus. Just as important is that the volcano is actually active. That means that if it were to erupt, the ice and snow of the continent would be in trouble. Granted, it would not melt the entire continent away, but it could do some damage. In fact, it would be interesting to see just how the lava would react to the frigid temperatures and how long the eruption as a whole would last. Number 9. Giant Antarctic sea spiders. The giant Antarctic sea spider is indeed a rather rare and big thing, mainly because of the legs that protrude from their small bodies. Despite the name, though, they are not true spiders, they just look like nightmare versions of them. They actually belong to their own class of arthropods, and while they do share some traits with arachnids, like multiple legs and jointed bodies, they're more like distant cousins than close siblings. Most sea spiders around the world are rather small, but in Antarctica, they go full kaiju. Some species will grow to over 12 inches across, legs included. That's not exactly colossal in land terms, but when it comes to underwater, it's absolutely striking. It's a phenomenon known as polar gigantism, a biological mystery where cold and oxygen-rich waters and slower metabolisms allow certain creatures to grow much larger than they do in warmer regions. What makes them even more interesting and freaky to some is that they have an atypical way of laying their eggs. They'll actually lay thousands of them and then stick them directly onto the ocean floor. The reason the eggs are able to survive is because they're covered in algae in order to blend in with the environment. Number 8. Lost wallet. I am talking about a story of a wallet that was returned to its owner over 5 decades after he had lost it. I had completely forgotten that I had lost it. And yes, he lost that wallet in Antarctica. Talk about a really weird place to leave something behind that's rather important. I'll start from the beginning. The man in question, Paul Grisham, used to be part of the United States Navy, and he was given an assignment to go down to Antarctica alongside some meteorologists and was staged at McMurdo Base during a 13-month period. He worked and lived there, and when it was time to leave, he accidentally left his wallet behind. Decades later, when work was being done on the base, the wallet itself was then rediscovered. Grisham was 90 years old at that time, and that highlighted just how long it had been since his Navy days. And you want to know what was in the wallet? Well, it contained his Navy ID card, a driver's license, a pocket reference card on what to do during atomic, biological, and chemical attacks, a beer ration punch card, which arguably is the most important, a tax withholding statement, and receipts for money orders that were sent to his wife. So, all the typical stuff for a Navy man of the time. I definitely want to know more about that beer ration punch card, though. It's likely that they had to ensure that nobody was drinking too much of their supply. It should be noted that while this was an official Navy mission, Grisham wasn't exactly thrilled to be going down there. To be honest, I don't blame him on that front. I mean, after all, Antarctica is cold and remote, and he was married and had 2 children at the time, and it couldn't have been easy on any of them. Yet he did his duty for the country, and decades later was given a unique reminder of his time at the bottom of the world. Number 7. Life on the bottom. Previously, I said that life does exist in Antarctica, and that is 100% true. You can likely name a few of their citizens right now, like penguins or sea lions. However, if you want an even more diverse lineup of creatures, you need only to go to the waters that surround the continent. The beings that live in the ocean surrounding Antarctica count as residents mainly because they've had to adapt to those frigid temperatures and conditions over the years, and they live quite fine at the end of it all. This can be proven by people like Suzanne Lockhart, who has gone deep into the waters of Antarctica and found over a dozen brand new species of life inside of it. Not what you may have been expecting to hear, but she did find so many types of sea cucumbers that one of them was even named after her, which is kind of sweet, and she probably deserves it. Lockhart would tell you that all kinds of things have been found, including one day on a boat when she pulled up a heavy net and found that it was full of massive, hairy sponges that looked like vases and were a meter in length. Number 6. The Endurance. Explorations to Antarctica have been complicated, to say the least, over the years. People have established all kinds of bases there, with several nations staking a claim. But imagine trying to go there during the olden days of regular travel. If you didn't have certain things at your disposal, your ship was almost doomed to failure. And there were many doomed ships that went down on the continent. One of the most infamous was Ernest Shackleton's Endurance, a craft that was crushed by ice in 1915 and forced the crew to abandon it. Thankfully, they had enough boats to get away and later on be rescued, but the ship itself actually sank to the bottom of the ocean. 107 years later, it was rediscovered once again, and when cameras examined the craft, they were stunned to see that it was actually in remarkable shape. It's likely because it had been preserved by the frigid waters, and if you look at it, you would have likely guessed it had not been down there for any more than a few years, let alone 107. It was very, very deep into the water, almost 3,000 meters below sea level, which would explain why it took so long to find. Number 5. Ice singing. You may or may not know that there are often a variety of sounds that can come from a glacier or creatures in the deep that echo all around. Called the cryosphere, in Antarctica, there is an ice shelf that is truly special because it plays music at a frequency that humans cannot naturally hear. However, when special equipment is put into place, a hum is caused by the variety of winds and gusts that blow across the ice that can be heard. Scientists first detected this eerie hum while placing seismic sensors on the Ross ice shelf to monitor vibrations caused by temperature changes. To their surprise, the sensors picked up consistent low-frequency vibrations, like a giant, frozen drum being struck softly and rhythmically. The pattern of the hum is so stable that researchers now use it as a kind of diagnostic tool to assess the structural health of the ice shelf. During warmer weather, when surface snowmelts or wind speeds increase, the pitch and rhythm of the humming change slightly, creating an environmental melody that reflects real-time climate conditions. In one striking instance, after a major Antarctic storm, the musical tones of the ice shelf deepened, like a sorrowful dirge echoing across the frozen continent. Some researchers even compared the sound to a slowed-down version of whale song or the resonant vibration of a distant pipe organ. Though it's not music in the traditional sense, this persistent vibration has sparked interest among composers and sound artists, who have translated the data into haunting compositions. Equally as important, it is not a random sound. It's actually a constant one that happens at about 5 beats per minute, and that's why many people liken it to singing, not unlike a natural tune. A variety of instances can change how that sound is emitted. Number 4. Green icebergs. Icebergs are typically one or two colors, either being white or blue, so to hear that one is green can feel odd, not unlike the blood falls that I showed you earlier. So then, what is the explanation for this particular anomaly? Well, it has to do with the very thing that made the blood falls red. More specifically, the icebergs over time get what's known as glacial flour, and that flour covers the icebergs to help them change color. The glacial flour is composed of finely ground rock particles created by the slow grinding movement of glaciers over bedrock, producing a silty material rich in minerals like iron and other sediments. As this sediment-rich water freezes into the ice, it becomes trapped and preserved, layering the iceberg with a unique chemical signature. In Antarctica, where some of these green icebergs have been spotted, researchers have theorized that the iron-laden flour becomes highly concentrated in older, denser ice layers, leading to a deeper color transformation. One such iceberg was hauled up during an expedition and shocked the scientists by its jade-green hue, which was unlike anything they had seen in polar waters before. Some even speculated that the color could serve a biological purpose, perhaps affecting how the iceberg absorbs sunlight or interacts with surrounding marine life. Further analysis revealed that this unusual coloration might help fertilize surrounding ocean water with iron, stimulating plankton growth and contributing to localized ecosystem health. In that sense, green icebergs might be much more than an aesthetic oddity. They could be vital players in polar ecological cycles. But that iron-rich water turned the blood falls red and not green? Well, yes, that's true, and that's because it was only changing the water's color before, whereas in this time it's turning an entire iceberg a different color. And because of the pure blue coloring of the iceberg, when it's mixed with the yellowish red flour, you then end up with a green iceberg. Number 3. Antarctica's dry valleys. Dry is not a word that is usually used to describe Antarctica in any way, shape, or form. Yet, there are dry valleys on the continent that directly contradict everything else that's going on around it. These valleys exist in part due to the terrain that surrounds them and because the humidity of the area is incredibly low. Some of the most famous examples are the McMurdo Dry Valleys, a region so barren that scientists often compare it to the surface of Mars. These valleys have not seen rain for nearly 2 million years, and in some locations, the ice has retreated so far that bare rock stretches for miles. Despite the harshness, research stations have been set up nearby to study the unique geological and biological conditions. In fact, NASA has even used these valleys as a test site for Mars rover equipment because the terrain is so otherworldly. Strange mineral deposits have been found in the soil, and some researchers believe that ancient glacial movements left behind clues about Earth's climate from over 10,000 years ago. Incredibly, beneath some of the valley floors, scientists have discovered subglacial lakes and brine channels, which could harbor microbial life forms that have survived in isolation for millennia. The environment here challenges our understanding of where life can exist and how resilient it truly is. Add to that, there are strong winds, and that means that any snow that does try to hit the ground is then subsequently blown away before it lands or tries to stick. The irony here is that because of its unique setting, there are things that live there that many have tried to study. And before you say anything, it's typically types of bacteria that are found there. Even still, it goes to show that Antarctica has many different surprises for anyone who looks beyond its frozen fronts. Number 2. Blood falls. This is another classic story that comes out of Antarctica that many of you may likely be familiar with. The blood falls, as they are known, were first discovered and observed by man in 1911 during the Terra Nova expedition, and the man at the helm of the expedition would later name the glacier and the valley after himself. As you can see, the thing that makes the place so special is the fact that the water in this glacial waterfall runs red, which is not how things usually go with waterfalls. And yet, there it is. Naturally, it baffled the Terra Nova crew and others who came to observe it over the years. The first explanation was that the water in the glacier was full of red algae, and that was what changed the water to become what it was now. But for the record, that has happened in the past with certain rivers and other bodies of water. But that is not what is happening here, as people would later find out. The water in the glacier has a special element in it, namely iron. And what happens when iron meets oxygen? Creates rust. And so, the red color that you see is not the color of blood. It's actually rusty-colored water. Number 1. Massive tunnels. The last one may seem impossible, but it has been proven, I assure you. In Antarctica, scans of a variety of spots of ice revealed that there were actually massive tunnels cut directly into the ice sheet of the continent. And those tunnels were as tall as the Eiffel Tower in Paris, France. Not as long as the Eiffel Tower is high, the entrances of the tunnels were as tall as the Eiffel Tower. Scientists were stunned by the clarity and size of the sonar images. Some of these tunnels measured over 300 meters in height and stretched for miles under the ice. The sheer scale led to speculation about their origins, with some initially suspecting volcanic activity or geothermal heat. But further studies confirmed that they were formed by ancient subglacial rivers, which had carved their way through the ice for thousands of years. During the summer melt season, water from the surface percolates down into the depths of the ice sheet and eventually forms pressurized rivers that can flow with incredible force. As the water moves, it melts and scours out walls of the ice, creating chambers and hallways large enough to hide aircraft hangars. Some expedition teams have even suggested that these tunnels could one day be explored by autonomous underwater vehicles, similar to those used in deep-sea missions. So how did such a tunnel get made? Despite Antarctica being a frigid place, rivers do actually run through it, and meltwater will seep down, which means that the water cuts through the ice and snow, freezing. Why are you doing this? This is one of the coldest places. Eventually, that opens up all manner of tunnels for people to go through should they want to. I don't recommend doing that during your next trip though. But then again, never close the door on adventure. That's all for our journey through the frozen realm of Antarctica and the many fascinating discoveries made there, along with the theories about what else might be hidden beneath the ice. Were you surprised by any of these revelations? Which one stood out the most to you? Or maybe you know of another discovery in Antarctica that deserves a mention. Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to check out the other awesome videos popping up on your screen, and I'll see you next time.